Hello guys, and welcome back to HJW Gaming and a continuation of my commander guides. This time taking a look at a fairly enigmatic commander, being the defensive wall Falgin. Now Falgin's quite an interesting commander as he sits quite interestingly between physical damage and support commander, as you'll see from his stats. However, I feel he serves best as that support commander, so that's the kind of build we're going to be looking into today. Talking about his stats, you can see most of the time it's fairly mediocre across the board. He has fairly low damage, reasonable amounts of HP, fairly average command. You know, it's not exceptional. It's actually lower than commanders like Aragorn, King of Men, but it's higher than some others, higher than a lot of the direct damage commanders, for example. His base value for attack is actually pretty reasonable at 44, going up by 0.52 per level. And his defense is fairly mediocre, going up at 0.63 per level. However, this, you'll notice later on when we look at skills, is fairly important. Focus is fairly low, as is his initiative, so don't expect him to be fast, and don't expect him to be particularly great against focus damage. First up, we'll look at how we plan to gear him. And I think reference to his skills is probably quite important here for Falgin, as he won't be geared the same way as many other commanders. Now, as we're going to be looking to use him as the defensive tank, of course, command is going to be crucial. However, we're additionally going to be making reference to Thrain's Guards, his Respect 5 skill. Now, this reduces the damage taken by dwarf units in 3 allied formations up to 30%. However, when 10 skill points are allocated, this is modified by the commander's defense stat. So we are going to be looking to also increase his defense as much as possible. Therefore, when we look to gear him, we're going to be looking to increase not only his own personal command, but also his commander defense. On top of this, however, is also the consideration that we are going to be using taunt units with Falgin. So on top of that command and defense prioritization, we also want unit defense. So Falgin is one of the few commanders we actually need 3 different stats to be fairly high to utilize him effectively. But now let's take a look into a couple of the different weapons we can use. Now, the best in slot for him is the Reckoning. The reason we would use the Reckoning is that it offers the most unit defense possible, as well as a high amount of command. A second strong option is also the Lang, as the Lang offers good command again and unit defense, as well as a reasonable amount of commander defense on top of that as well. So it will make additional use of that Thrain's Guards. So Thrain can be an excellent choice, though Reckoning I think is probably still best for that additional unit defense. As far as flawless gear goes, the best in slot is going to be the Cutlass. If you can get a fully refined Cutlass, you'll gain 130 command, and fully strengthened, you'll gain 15 defense. So you'll notice command and defense is quite a bit below what you'll get from both Lang and Reckoning. So I would definitely recommend trying to prioritize getting the flawless equivalent if possible. But if not, the exquisite Cutlass is definitely the next best options. For chest pieces, there's a few different options you can go down here. Durin's Plate can be very strong, as it does offer an enormous amount of unit defense, as well as a reasonable amount of HP. The High-Elf Hauberk can also be strong here as well. Essentially, you're just looking to try and maximise that unit defense. So either the High-Elf Hauberk or the Durin's Plate will work very effectively. HP, of course, doesn't matter too much. Even though we're using him as a tank, I don't think HP is too effective, as once your troops are gone, your commander will be cut through fairly easily, so I wouldn't worry too much about refining. I just look towards getting as high a strength Durin's Plate or High Elf Hauberk as possible. For exquisite rarity, the Superior Hauberk is the next best choice. Reason being, this offers commander defense to get that additional stat boosting of Thrain's Guard, as well as unit defense. For Helm, the best in slot is going to be the Cask of the Submerged Isle. The reason for this is it does offer a large amount of command and also the maximum amount of unit defense. There aren't many options that are as strong as this, so this will be pretty much the only option you're going to want to use. Although as far as exquisite rarities, you have a few different options. The Brutal Helmet does offer commander defense, but only unit attack, so it's maybe not the best choice. I personally would recommend the 2.0 Horseman's Helm, as this does offer command, not HP for the commander, and the most unit defense as well. So if you can fully strengthen and refine this, it will be decent, though again, the disparity between the exquisite and flawless rarity is very large. And lastly, for accessories, we are going to want to be using something I don't have available here, which is, I will show in chest. We're going to want to look to use the Defender of the Mountain. Reason being, large amount of command, once again, high amounts of commander defense, and also unit defense. So it has all three of the stats that are most effective for Falgin. Now, another great choice here is also the Silver Harp of Rivendell. It offers an additional amount of command. The defense per unit is also higher. However, it doesn't offer that that commander defense. So the effectiveness of Thrain's guards is going to be lower. So what does this mean with the high unit defense and command versus commander defense? With high unit defense and command, Falgin's tanking himself using the taunt units will be much better, so he will lose less of these usually very expensive troops. However, with higher commander defense, the troops on your other commanders will die slower as well. So if you have particularly soft commanders in the other places, say a lot of DD commanders, so damage dealing commanders, they could die very quickly because of their low command stat. So you do need a large amount of buff coming from Thrain's guards. Both of these, however, are very strong choices. Personally, I prefer Defender of the Mountain. Now, if we go back into Falgin's skills, as we've said here, Thrain's guards is very, very important, as this does do that kind of protection of your other units. However, it's important to note that you should put a point first into Ered Luin Expedition before you put a point into Thrain's guards. The reason being is you'll get this defense buff for each type of dwarf unit in your army, up to 2 stacks, but this does actually activate in the pre-battle phase. So once you get this increased, it will actually directly affect Thrain's guards if you put the skill point into Ered Luin Expedition first. So you want to put 1 point in there and then maximise Thrain's guards. From there, you can see you will be getting, by all dwarf units in 3 allied formations for 6 hits, minus 30%, and it becomes 8 hits with level 5, modified by that commander defense stat. Now that modifier can affect it quite greatly, making this almost like a second White Council. So it can be a very, very effective skill, and you'll only want to use dwarf units on the formations allied to Falgin. The second skill to put points into is actually, and you'll be surprised here, Musician. The reason for this is, once you get 10 points into Musician, the heal is fairly average. As you know, all healing in 2.0 is fairly mediocre. The most you'll hit here is likely to be, even with a fairly welled Falgin, maybe 15 to 20,000. So that's kind of mediocre, even with his high command stat. However, you do also get a purification of 1 debuff, which can be great if you get something like Sauron's Deceiver or Gandalf the White's White Rider, and you purify that. That means you're taking between 10 and 25-30% less damage, so that can be huge. But the main thing we're going for here is also 10 additional unit defense, which can be very useful for, again, making your units more tanky. Any remaining points I would then put back into Ered Luin formation to again get that defense buffed as much as possible, so that you can have that knock-on effect also on Thrain's guards, as well as increasing the defense and tankiness of your army. Now, looking into his relic and whether that's worth it, you'll see here that his relic is the Hardy Buckler. Now, I think this is undoubtedly worth it and possibly one of the best relics currently in the game. You'll see from the face stats, actually 3 of the stats, command, defense and unit defense, are all extremely useful for this Falgin build. So we'll definitely be wanting to pick this up just for those alone. And I would also, for probably the first time ever, recommend strengthening this as much as you can, as you have a kind of a 75% chance of getting a stat that's useful to Falgin buffed by doing so. Additionally, the buff on this, Adventurer's Determination, is excellent as well, as it reduces the damage taken by Falgin's army, so if you're using a melee unit, which you will be if we're using one of the taunt units, by up to 6%. It increases the damage dealt by this formation's ranged units by 6%, which we won't use, unfortunately, as we will be using, as I said, taunt units. But the above effects gain 6% for each allied dwarf unit present. As you'll be using 3 dwarf units on the other 3 commanders around in your army, that means you get a massive 24% reduction to damage taken by this formation's melee units when fully refined. That is huge, especially when you combine with additional commander defense and unit defense. The Hardy Buckler almost becomes essential for Falgin, and the jump up in ability and output you'll get from Falgin once he's ascended and you have his unique is enormous. So I'd go as far to say he's decent but fairly mid until he's ascended, but once ascended and has the Relic, he's up there as one of the top tier support commanders available in the game. For units on Falgin, the best choice is the Great Beast. Reason being is that it has the most superior taunt in the game, affecting 3 opponents' formations. They have unbelievable HP at 1150, and they have good defense at 44. Now, you don't want to face these units once Falgin's buffed them to near 200 defense with that enormous HP and Falgin's command all packed into one. They are really something to behold. Alternatives, of course, second choice would probably be a Swan Knight, which has a lesser taunt in my opinion, and they are more expensive and don't have quite the same defensive capability, though they are still a very good and strong choice. Then your third choice, and definitely the lesser of the 3, is the Mountain Troll. They're still as capable of a taunt, though it's not quite as effective or defensively sound as either the Great Beast or the Swan Knight. So I would put this in third place. But any of these, as long as you have a taunt on your Falgin focusing damage on him, will be phenomenal. For commanders to pair with Falgin, I would recommend one other support commander. The best of these available is Gandalf the White, as you can get that damage received buff on all of your troops to combine with Thrain's Guard using White Council to make your troops extremely tanky, and you can also inflict that damage received debuff on the opponent's troops through White Rider. A slightly worse choice is Gandalf the Grey, as of course he does not have that White Rider effect, but he can still inflict White Council to your own troops and make your troops incredibly tanky. Or a third choice could also be Sauron. As Sauron, you can use his Deceiver to try and steal opponents' buffs, give them a damage received debuff, and also use his enemy skill to reduce the opponent's commander's stats. So I recommend using one of these other support commanders alongside Falgin. So alongside these 2 supports, I then have 2 different DD, so damage dealing commanders. Best options, of course, if you can get them to a whaled level, being Dane and Skullhelm. Beorn is also exceptional. Aragorn, King of Men, can be another great choice. Basically, any of the other excellent DD commanders. The main thing is that on all of these other commanders, so both the support and the 2 DDs, you need to make sure that you use dwarven troops on all of these, the best of which in my opinion being the Guardian, as they're extremely cheap and extremely tanky. So you need to make sure you use these on all the other commanders in Falgin's army. As for counters to Falgin, there are a couple. The first of which being Sauron, as his Deceiver skill, applied in the pre-battle phase, can inflict madness and mean that Falgin's buffs can apply to the opponent's troops rather than your own. So therefore, you lose out on that damage received buff, and the opponents actually gain it, so it can be a huge swing in battle. Other counters include the Shadow and Sestaro, and other commanders that inflict multiple instances of damage, as similar to White Council and the way that they deal with this, they will, through multiple instances of damage, burn through Thrain's Guard very, very quickly, meaning that it doesn't last into the later rounds. Lastly, the Nazgul commanders such as Sestaro, Skullhelm and Witch King also have the Nazgul skill, which does counter a little against Thrain's Guards, as it can inflict its damage prior to this skill being inflicted, and therefore before you have that damage received buff on your troops, so it can inflict its damage prior to that time. And with that, I really hope you guys have enjoyed. If you found this guide useful, please hit the like button and please hit subscribe to see more of my upcoming guides in future. With that, I've been HJW Gaming, and I really hope to see you on the next one.